He didn't think twice. He just bent down, picked up that sugar dispenser, and set it gently on her table, while every other person in that cafe kept their eyes glued to their phones. Ethan Walker was exhausted, behind on rent, and running on 3 hours of sleep. He had zero reason to stop. But he did. In that single, unremarkable moment, 30 seconds of basic human decency set into motion a chain of events so unbelievable, so life-altering, that weeks later, 2 lawyers in $1,000 suits would be standing at his front door. Drop a comment with your city right now. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. The alarm went off at 4:47 in the morning. Ethan Walker didn't slam it, didn't groan. He just opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling for exactly 4 seconds. The same 4 seconds he gave himself every single morning, before swinging his legs over the side of the bed and planting his feet flat on the cold hardwood floor. 4 seconds. That was all the self-pity he allowed. He had learned a long time ago that if you lay there any longer than that, the weight of everything would press down on your chest, and you'd never get up at all. He stood, rolled his shoulders, and got to work. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen the size of a large closet, and a living room that doubled as Ethan's office, laundry station, and storage unit. The walls were bare except for 2 things: a photo of his daughter Lily at age 5, standing in front of a sand castle she'd built herself, wearing a yellow swimsuit and the most proud grin he'd ever seen on a human face, and a sticky note that read in his own handwriting, "She's counting on you. Don't quit." He didn't need motivational quotes. He needed one reminder. That was enough. In the kitchen, he moved quietly. Lily was still asleep, and she had school at 7:30. He made 2 sandwiches, one for her lunchbox, one for himself that he'd eat in his truck between jobs, and set out her cereal, her orange juice, and her vitamins on the counter. He filled her water bottle. He checked her homework folder, which was still sitting on the kitchen table where she'd left it the night before. Her handwriting was getting better. 3rd grade. She was getting so fast at everything. He pressed his hand flat over the homework folder for just a moment. Don't quit. He was out the door by 5:15. Ethan Walker was 41 years old, and he worked 3 jobs. The first was a maintenance position at a commercial laundry facility on the east side of the city. He worked 5 to 9 in the morning, Monday through Friday, handling machine repairs, loading docks, and equipment checks. It wasn't glamorous work, and the facility was loud and hot by 6 a.m., smelling of industrial detergent and rubber gaskets. But the shift supervisor, a stout Puerto Rican man named Gerald, who had a collection of baseball caps and an opinion about everything, paid on time and never asked Ethan to cut corners. The second job was a delivery route for a regional grocery chain. He picked up that shift 3 afternoons a week, loading boxes into the back of his pickup truck and driving orders to residential addresses across 4 zip codes. The pay was mediocre, the tips were sporadic, and the routing software consistently sent him in illogical patterns across town. But it was consistent, and consistent was what he needed. The third job, the one that took the most out of him, was weekend handyman work. He'd built a small reputation through word of mouth. Cracked drywall, leaking faucets, fence panels, deck boards, bathroom tile. Whatever people needed fixed, he fixed it. He charged fair prices, and he did the work right the first time, which was apparently rare enough that his phone stayed busy. 3 jobs, 1 daughter, 1 purpose. His wife Dana had left 3 years ago. There was no dramatic moment, no screaming fight, no one incident he could point to and say, that was it. She had simply looked at him one evening across the dinner table and said quietly, "I don't think I can do this anymore." And she had meant all of it. The tight money, the small apartment, the exhaustion, the feeling that they were both treading water in a pool that kept getting deeper. He didn't blame her. He had tried for a long time not to blame her. What he did know was that when she walked out, Lily was 6 years old, and she had looked up at Ethan that night with an expression no 6-year-old should ever have. The expression of a child who is trying very hard to understand something that doesn't make sense. And he had gotten down on one knee and said, "It's okay, baby. I've got you. I've always got you." And he'd meant every word. The café was called Morning Bell. It wasn't fancy. It was the kind of place that had the same 5 items on the menu for 20 years and hadn't changed the font on the chalkboard since 2008. The booths were worn vinyl. The coffee was decent. The woman behind the counter, a sharp-faced woman named Bev, had worked there for as long as anyone could remember and moved with the brisk efficiency of someone who had made 10,000 cups of coffee and had no patience for indecision. Ethan had started coming in about 2 years ago. He came in early, before 6, in the window between leaving his apartment and starting his shift at the laundry facility. He ordered the same thing every time: black coffee, no sugar, and a plain egg sandwich. Sat at the counter, ate quickly, and left a $1 tip regardless of what he'd ordered. He wasn't a regular who chatted. He wasn't a regular who lingered. He was a regular who showed up, did what he came to do, and moved on. Bev respected that. She didn't make small talk with him. She just poured his coffee before he'd sat down. It was a Thursday morning in early October when he first noticed her. He'd come in a few minutes later than usual. There'd been a fender bender on Caldwell Avenue that had backed traffic up half a mile, and he'd sat in his truck burning 7 minutes he didn't have to burn. And when he pushed through the glass door of Morning Bell and felt the warmth hit his face, he was already doing the mental arithmetic of whether he could still make it to the laundry facility on time. He almost didn't look up. But something made him. She was sitting at the table near the window, the one closest to the door, the one that had extra clearance on the left side because the café had removed a chair to comply with accessibility standards. She was in a wheelchair. The chair was simple, functional, nothing motorized. She was wearing a dark green jacket, her hair pulled back, and she was staring at the table in front of her with the expression of someone who had been sitting very still for a very long time. She looked to be in her mid-30s, maybe younger. It was hard to tell. There was something about her eyes, the way they held a tiredness that wasn't just physical, that made her seem older. Ethan might not have paid any more attention to her than that if the sugar dispenser hadn't slipped. She'd reached for it, the small glass dispenser that sat in the center of every table at Morning Bell, and it had tipped off the edge of the table and landed on the floor with a hollow clatter, rolling a few inches under the table, out of her reach. He watched what happened next. 2 men at the counter glanced over and looked away. A woman in a business blazer, waiting for her order to go, looked down at her phone. The teenager near the window didn't even register the sound. Bev was in the back, clattering around with something. The woman in the wheelchair looked at the sugar dispenser on the floor. She tried to lean forward and reach it. She couldn't get to it. She sat back up. She pressed her lips together in a thin line, not asking for help, not calling out, just sitting with the quiet indignity of it. Ethan was already moving. He crossed the café in 4 steps, bent down without saying a word, picked up the sugar dispenser, and set it back on the table in front of her. She looked up at him. He straightened up and met her eyes. "Got it," he said. Just that. Then he turned back toward the counter. "Thank you." Her voice was soft, but it had weight to it, like she hadn't used it much lately. He nodded without turning around, sat down at the counter. Bev appeared and set his coffee in front of him without a word. He ate his sandwich, drank his coffee, left his $1 tip. He didn't think about her again until the next morning. She was there again on Friday. Same table, same green jacket, same stillness. This time she had a cup of tea in front of her, but no food. She was reading something on a phone with a cracked screen, and when Ethan came in, she didn't look up. He ordered his usual, sat at the counter. Somewhere in the middle of his second sip of coffee, he glanced over at her table and noticed she wasn't eating. He turned to Bev. "She order anything besides the tea?" Bev looked over her shoulder briefly. "Just the tea." "How long has she been here?" Bev considered. "Since I opened, 7 a.m. It was 6:40 now. Ethan frowned. "Has she been here before?" "Few times this week." Bev wiped the counter. "Doesn't order much. Sits a long time." She paused. "Quiet type." Ethan turned back to his coffee. He sat with it for about 30 seconds. Then he said, "Add an egg sandwich to my order." Bev raised an eyebrow. "For her," he said. Bev didn't comment. She just wrote it down. When the sandwich came out, Ethan picked it up, walked over to the table by the window, and set it down in front of the woman without ceremony. She looked up sharply, immediately on guard. The kind of wariness that doesn't come from nowhere, the kind that gets built over time. "I didn't order this," she said. "I know," Ethan said. "It's just a sandwich. You don't have to eat it." He held up one hand, palm out. "I'm not trying to make anything weird. I just figured you've been here a while." She looked at the sandwich, then at him, then at the sandwich again. "I'm not a charity case," she said. The words were quiet, but there was steel in them. "No," Ethan said, "neither am I. And I eat alone every morning, which I'm fine with. I'm not asking to sit with you. I'm just telling you the sandwich is paid for." A beat. "My name's Ethan," he said. She didn't offer hers. She looked back down at the sandwich for a long moment. Then she picked it up and took a bite. He took that as his cue to leave. He went back to the counter, finished his coffee, left his tip, and went to work. The next Monday, she was there again, and on Tuesday, and Wednesday. Each time, Ethan ordered 2 egg sandwiches. He didn't make a production of it. He set hers on her table without breaking stride, said nothing, and went back to his seat. On Wednesday, she said, "You're going to make this a habit." He shrugged. "I order too much food anyway." She looked at him with the careful expression of someone evaluating a situation they don't quite trust yet. "You don't have to do this." "I know," he said. "Have a good morning." And he sat back down. On Friday of that week, she spoke to him before he even sat down. "My name is Clara," she said. He stopped, turned. She was looking at him directly, and he understood, without her having to say it, that this was something it had cost her to offer. "Clara," he repeated. "Good to meet you." "You've been buying me breakfast for 2 weeks," she said. "I thought you should at least know who you're feeding." "Fair enough," he said. He didn't ask questions. He sat down at the counter and drank his coffee, and after a few minutes she said, "You work nearby?" "Few places," he said. "You?" A pause. "I'm between things right now." "Okay," he said. He didn't push. He'd learned a long time ago that people told you what they wanted to tell you when they were ready to tell it, and pushing before then just closed the door. He finished his coffee, got up, left his tip. "See you Monday, Clara," he said. "Maybe," she said. But she was there Monday. The conversations came slowly, the way trust always comes, in small increments, not in declarations. He learned pieces of her, not her whole story, not anything close, just pieces, the way you find edges of a puzzle before you understand what the picture is. She had grown up on the East Coast. She liked strong tea, not coffee. She had a mother she described only as complicated. She had been, before the wheelchair, a marathon runner. She said that one morning, without expression, looking out the window, and something in the way she said it made Ethan understand that she hadn't said it to earn sympathy. She'd said it the way you say a fact about someone else's life. "Do you miss it?" he asked. She thought about that for a while. "I miss who I was when I was running," she said finally. "I'm not sure it's the same thing." He thought about that for a long time after he left. He told her pieces too. He didn't know why exactly. He wasn't a man who talked freely about himself. But there was something about the way Clara listened that made talking feel safe. She didn't react. She didn't offer commentary. She just listened with her whole attention, which was rarer than it should have been. He told her about Lily, about the sandcastle photo on the wall, about the sticky note he'd put up 3 years ago that he hadn't yet decided whether to take down. "What does it say?" Clara asked. He told her. She was quiet for a moment. "That's a lot of pressure," she said. "Yeah," he said, "but it's the right pressure." She looked at him. "She's lucky." "I'm luckier," he said, and meant it. It was a Tuesday morning, the 3rd week of October, when everything cracked open. Ethan came in at his usual time to find Clara already there, but something was different. The stillness that he'd come to read as her default, the composed, carefully maintained stillness of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible, was gone. She was holding her phone in both hands, and her knuckles were white. He set her sandwich down. She didn't acknowledge it. "Clara," he said quietly. She looked up. Her eyes were steady, but her jaw was tight, the way a person looks when they're holding something very heavy and refusing to let it show on their face. "I need to tell you something," she said. He pulled out the chair across from her, the empty one, the one he'd never sat in, and sat down. She looked at the phone in her hands. Then she set it face down on the table. "The wheelchair," she said. "It's not—" She stopped, restarted. "I was in an accident 18 months ago. There was real damage, physical therapy, recovery." She met his eyes. "But the reason I'm still using it when I come here, when I go out, that's different." He said nothing. He waited. "There's a man," she said. "His name is Marcus. We were engaged 3 years ago. His family—" She pressed her lips together briefly. "His family has money. The kind of money that buys things, favors, access, people." "Okay," Ethan said. His voice was level. "He's been looking for me," she said, "for 8 months, since I left." She paused. "He doesn't know what I look like in the wheelchair. He doesn't. He's looking for the woman he knew, and I'm not her anymore. Not exactly." Something flickered across her face. "It's not a disguise exactly. It's more like I stopped being recognizable to him." Ethan absorbed this. "Are you safe?" "Right now, yes." She picked up her tea, set it down without drinking it. "But his people are getting closer. I've moved twice. I've changed my routine." She looked at him directly. "You've been kind to me, and I didn't want to keep accepting that without you knowing, that there's something around me, something that follows me." The café was filling up around them, the morning rush thickening, voices layering over voices. But Ethan barely registered any of it. "Does anyone know where you are?" he asked. "Someone you trust?" "My mother," she said quietly. "She knows I'm alive. She doesn't know where." "Why not?" Clara looked out the window. A long moment passed. "Because my mother means well," she said. "But my mother has never once in her life been able to keep a secret. And if Marcus's family approached her—" She shook her head. "She'd tell them without meaning to. She'd think she was helping." Ethan nodded slowly. "I'm not telling you this because I want something from you," Clara said. Her voice was careful, deliberate. She was choosing every word. "I'm telling you because you've given me something. Real something. Consistency. And I owe you honesty in return." He looked at her for a long moment. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "You never did." She looked like she wanted to argue that, but she didn't. "What do you need?" he asked. She blinked, like the question surprised her. "Right now?" she said. "Right now." She thought about it. "I need someone to not make this into a bigger thing than it is." He almost smiled. "I can do that." And she hesitated. "I need to know that if I disappear, if one morning I'm not here, you won't worry." He was quiet for a beat. "I won't make you that promise," he said. She looked at him. "But I'll respect whatever you decide," he said. "That I can promise." She held his gaze. Something in her expression shifted. Not quite relief, but something adjacent to it. Like a door that had been held shut with a great deal of effort had been allowed to ease open, just slightly. "Thank you," she said, "for the sandwiches." "Don't mention it," he said. "I mean that literally. Don't mention it." For the first time since he'd known her, she smiled. It was small, careful, and it lasted only a second. But it was real. He went to work. He ran his route. He fixed a leaky pipe on Saturday afternoon for a retired school principal named Dorothy, who paid him in cash and sent him home with a foil-wrapped plate of food and a look that reminded him painfully of his own mother. He took Lily to the library on Sunday. She was working on a report about ocean animals, and she spent 40 minutes pulling books off shelves with the focused seriousness of a research scientist, which made his chest ache with something enormous and wordless. "Dad," she said, looking up from a book about bioluminescent jellyfish, "did you know that some jellyfish are technically immortal?" "I didn't know that," he said. "It's because they can revert to an earlier stage of their life cycle when they get old or stressed," she said. "They just become young again." "That must be nice," he said. She gave him a look that suggested she did not appreciate the deflection. "It's a survival mechanism, Dad." "Right," he said. "Very efficient." She went back to her book, shaking her head slightly in the way she'd recently developed. The gesture of a child who has decided that adults are mildly disappointing. He watched her turn pages. The library was warm and quiet. He thought about Clara. He thought about what it meant to become unrecognizable to someone who'd once known you completely. He thought about whether that was a loss or a kind of freedom. He didn't reach any conclusions. He didn't need to. He just sat next to his daughter in the warm library and watched her read about jellyfish that could live forever. Monday. The last Monday of October. Cold now. Properly cold. The kind of morning where your breath showed, and the windows of parked cars were fogged, and the sky was the particular gray of early winter. Ethan drove to Morning Bell with the heat running and an unnameable tension in his stomach that he couldn't explain and didn't try to. Clara was there. She was sitting at her usual table, but she wasn't looking at her phone. She was looking at the door, waiting. When he came in, she looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her before. Not fear, not exactly. Something past fear. The way the eye of a storm is quiet, because the wind has made every decision it's going to make, and there's nothing left to decide. He sat down across from her without being invited. "What happened?" he said. "He found the neighborhood," she said. "Not this cafe, not this block, but the neighborhood." She kept her voice flat and even. "One of his men was asking questions at a pharmacy 2 miles from here. The pharmacist called a mutual friend." She paused. I need to move again. Okay, Ethan said. Today, she said. He absorbed that. Do you have somewhere to go? I have options. He didn't ask what they were. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Clara, is there anyone in your life, anyone you trust completely, who can help you with this? Not just options, someone who has resources, who can actually protect you. She was quiet for a moment. My mother, she said slowly. My mother has resources. She has more than resources. A pause. She's been trying to find me for months. Because she's worried? Because she's... Clara stopped. Her jaw worked. She loves me, in the way that she knows how. It's just that her love and her control are... She pressed two fingers together. Very close together. Clara. She looked at him. Call her, he said quietly. Not for me, not because I think it's the perfect solution, but because you're tired and you've been carrying this alone for too long, and some problems are bigger than one person is supposed to carry alone. Her eyes went to the window. Tell me I'm wrong, he said. She didn't. A long silence stretched out between them. The café moved around them. Bev called out an order, the door opened and closed, someone laughed at the counter. And in the middle of all of it, Clara sat very still. Then she picked up her phone. She looked at it for a long moment, like she was holding something that had the potential to change everything, and she was giving herself one last second to exist in the moment before she changed it. Then she dialed. Ethan stood up. I'll get the sandwiches, he said. She nodded. The phone was ringing. He went to the counter. Bev was already pouring his coffee. 2 sandwiches, he said. Same as always, she said. Same as always, he said. Behind him, he heard Clara's voice, quiet, careful, and after a beat, unmistakably raw. Mom, she said, it's me. I need you to listen. He didn't turn around. He just stood at the counter and held his coffee in both hands and waited. Drop your city in the comments below. I want to see where in the world this story has reached. And if this hits you right in the chest, the way Ethan's quiet choices hit me, don't leave without hitting subscribe. Lily's counting on her dad. And we're just getting started. He heard her hang up the phone before he finished his coffee. He didn't turn around right away. He gave her a moment, the kind of moment a person needs after a conversation that costs them something. And he stared at the counter and listened to the cafe noise fill in around him. Bev refilled his cup without being asked. He nodded his thanks. When he finally turned, Clara was sitting with her hands flat on the table, palms down, like she was steadying herself against something that was moving underneath her. Her phone was face down again. Her tea had gone cold. He carried both sandwiches to the table and sat across from her. She didn't speak right away. He didn't push. After a while, she said, She cried. Your mother? She cried before I even finished the first sentence. Clara's voice was controlled, but just barely. I said, Mom, it's me. And she just started crying. 8 months. I've been gone 8 months, and she picked up the phone on the second ring like she'd been sitting next to it the entire time. Ethan didn't say anything. She probably was, Clara said quietly. He watched her pick up her sandwich and set it back down without eating it. Her hands weren't shaking, but they were working, the kind of restless energy that has nowhere to go. Is she coming? He asked. She's sending someone. A beat. She doesn't travel alone. She has... people. People, he repeated, carefully neutral. Clara looked at him. My mother is Margaret Hayes. The name landed on the table between them. Ethan turned it over in his head. He knew the name the way most people in the city knew it, from the side of a building downtown, From a philanthropic initiative he'd seen covered once on the local news. From the kind of ambient awareness you develop about people who have enough money that their name becomes part of the landscape. "Okay," he said. Clara watched his face. "You're not going to make that weird? Would it help if I did?" She almost smiled. "No." "Then no," he said. "I'm not going to make it weird." She picked up her sandwich again, and this time she ate it. Slowly, deliberately, like someone who had just remembered that the body needs things regardless of what the mind is doing. He ate his own. For a few minutes, neither of them talked, and the silence between them was the comfortable kind, the kind that had been built slowly over weeks of small mornings and didn't need to be filled. Then Clara said, "I should have called her sooner." "Maybe," he said. "I was afraid she'd tell Marcus's family where I was." She paused. "I'm still afraid of that. She doesn't understand what he's capable of. She still thinks of him as the charming man who came to dinner twice and brought flowers." Her voice tightened. "She hasn't seen the other version." "Have you told her?" "I've told her enough." Her jaw set. "She believes me. I know she does. She just processes things slowly. She wants to believe people are better than they are. It's always been her blind spot." Ethan thought about that. "That's not the worst blind spot to have." "It is," Clara said. "When the person you're blind about has lawyers and connections and 3 different private investigators on payroll." She said it without heat, just as fact. "Marcus doesn't let things go. That's the one thing I understood too late. He doesn't walk away from things he considers his." The word his sat in the air between them with a weight that didn't need explanation. "How long before your mother's people get here?" Ethan asked. "She said by this afternoon." Clara looked out the window. "She's in Connecticut. It's about 4 hours." "Where will you go?" "Somewhere safer than here." She turned back to him. "I want you to know, I'm not going to disappear without saying anything. I won't do that to you." He nodded. "You've been—" She stopped, started again. "You've been the most normal thing in my life for 3 weeks, which is either a very high compliment or a very low bar, and I'm genuinely not sure which." "I'll take it either way," he said. She looked at him for a moment. "You have a daughter." "Lily." "How old?" 8. Clara was quiet. "She's lucky," she said again. The same thing she'd said before, but it had a different weight this time, like she was saying something about herself that she wasn't ready to say directly. "She thinks jellyfish are more interesting than I am," he said, "so I'm not sure lucky is the right word." Clara did smile that time. A real one, wider than the small, careful ones he'd seen before. It changed her whole face. "That's exactly what lucky looks like," she said. He drove to work with that sentence sitting somewhere in the middle of his chest. He didn't hear from Clara that afternoon. He hadn't expected to. She didn't have his number, and he hadn't offered it, because it hadn't seemed like the right thing to push toward. What they had was a morning thing, a café thing, a thing that existed in that particular hour before the day took over. He'd respected the edges of it, but he thought about her through his afternoon route. He thought about her while he unloaded grocery boxes at a house on Fernmore Street, and an elderly man in a bathrobe signed his delivery slip and asked him if he thought it was going to rain. He thought about her while he ate his truck sandwich sitting in a parking lot off Route 9, watching a flock of starlings rearrange themselves across a telephone wire. He thought about what she'd said. "I've been the most normal thing in my life for 3 weeks." He was nobody's idea of exceptional. He was a man who woke up before 5 and worked until he was tired, and got up and did it again. He fixed things that were broken. He fed his daughter. He tipped $1 on a cup of coffee because Bev worked hard and deserved it. He hadn't done anything remarkable. He'd picked up a sugar dispenser. He'd bought a sandwich. He didn't understand how those things had become something worth anything to anyone. But he thought about the way Clara had looked at him when she smiled, really smiled. And he thought maybe the point wasn't the size of the thing. Maybe the point was just that someone had seen her sitting there alone and had decided she was worth noticing. He finished his sandwich, started the truck, went back to work. Tuesday morning, she wasn't there. He came in at his usual time, pushed through the glass door, felt the warmth, and the table by the window was empty. The extra clearance on the left side, the chair that had been removed, the spot that had become so associated in his mind with Clara that he instinctively looked for her whenever he walked in. Empty. He stood there for 1 second longer than he should have. Then he went to the counter and sat down. "Just the one this morning?" Bev said. "Just the one," he said. Bev set his coffee down. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. He ate his sandwich alone, left his $1 tip, went to work. Wednesday, empty table. Thursday, empty table. He told himself he wasn't worried. He told himself what she'd said. "I won't disappear without saying anything." And he held on to it the way you hold on to the last solid thing when the ground starts feeling uncertain. She'd called her mother. Her mother was sending people. She was somewhere safer. That was the right outcome. That was what he'd wanted for her. He told himself all of this, and it was all true. And it didn't entirely stop the low hum of concern that ran underneath everything like a frequency he couldn't quite turn off. Friday morning, he came into Morning Bell, and Bev looked up from the counter and said, without preamble, "Woman came in yesterday looking for you." He stopped. "Didn't know your name," Bev said. "Described you. Said you were a regular. Came in early. Always ordered the same thing." She paused. "I told her I didn't give out information about customers." "Thank you," he said. Bev studied him. She left a card. She reached under the counter and set a heavy cream-colored business card on the counter. Said if you wanted to reach out, you could. He picked it up. The card was simple. The kind of simple that costs more than complicated. No logo, no color. Just a name in clean black type. Margaret L. Hayes. And below it, a phone number. He stared at it for a long time. Bev was watching him. "You want your coffee?" she said. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I want my coffee." He put the card in his shirt pocket. He drank his coffee. He thought about Clara saying, "My mother means well." He thought about a woman who had sat by the phone for 8 months, waiting for her daughter to call. He didn't reach out that day. He didn't reach out Saturday. Sunday, he took Lily to her soccer game and stood on the sideline in the cold and watched her chase the ball with the complete unself-conscious joy of a child who has not yet learned to be embarrassed by effort. She was not especially skilled. She was spectacularly enthusiastic. She ran with her arms pumping and her ponytail flying, and when she finally got a foot on the ball and sent it sideways in the general wrong direction, she looked at Ethan with an enormous grin, and he gave her a thumbs up so big he probably pulled something. Driving home, with Lily in the back seat eating a granola bar and narrating, unprompted, the complete highlights of the game, including her own performance review, Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and touched the edge of the business card. He didn't call. Not yet. Monday morning. He pushed open the door of Morning Bell and stopped. Clara was there. Same table, different jacket, navy blue this time. Her hair was down, which he hadn't seen before. She looked different. Not just the jacket and the hair. Something in the way she was sitting was different. Less contracted, less pulled in. She looked like she'd slept. She looked at him when he came in, and there was something openly relieved in her expression, which she didn't try to hide. "You're here," he said. "I said I wouldn't disappear," she said. He crossed the café, sat down across from her, and for a moment they just looked at each other. The uncomplicated look of two people who have been quietly worried about each other and are now on the other side of it. "You okay?" he said. "Better." She wrapped both hands around her tea. "My mother's team got here Friday afternoon. They moved me to a hotel, a real one, not the place I've been staying, which was—" She shook her head slightly. "It was fine. It was fine, but it was very not fine." "And now?" "Now there are people who know where I am and who are paid specifically to make sure the wrong people don't find out." She looked at the table. "It's strange, being looked after. I forgot what it felt like." "Good strange or bad strange?" She considered. "Both." A pause. "My mother wants to meet with me this week, in person. I haven't seen her since— It's been a long time." Something crossed her face. "She's also been asking about you." He looked up. "Me?" "I told her about the café," Clara said. "I told her about the sandwiches." She met his eyes. "She asked who you were." "I told her you were the person who made the last 3 weeks survivable." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. He opened his mouth and closed it. "She's going to want to thank you," Clara said. Her tone was careful, watching him. "She's going to want to do it in the way she does things, which is—" She paused. "She's not a small gestures kind of person." "Clara, I'm not asking you to accept anything," she said quickly. "I'm just preparing you. She'll reach out. She already tried once." She tilted her head slightly. "Bev told me she came in." "She left a card," Ethan said. "Have you called?" "No." Clara looked at him. "Why not?" He thought about how to say it. "I don't need anything from her," he said finally. "That's not why I—" He stopped, restarted. "I bought you breakfast because you looked like you hadn't eaten, and because it was the right thing to do. That's it. There's no ledger here. I'm not owed anything, and I'm not looking for anything." "I know that," Clara said quietly. "That's exactly why she wants to find you." He shook his head slowly. "Ethan." Her voice was serious now, the careful tone stripped away, something more direct underneath. "My mother has more money than she knows what to do with, and she spends her life trying to deploy it toward things that actually matter. When I told her what you'd done, not the big version, just the real version, the egg sandwiches and the coffee and the sitting across from me and the 'you don't owe me anything,' she got very quiet." Clara paused. "My mother doesn't get quiet." It worried me a little, honestly. He said nothing. "She's not trying to buy you," Clara said. "She's trying to—" She searched for the word. "She's trying to respond proportionally to something that mattered. She doesn't know any other way to do that." Bev appeared with his coffee and a sandwich without him having ordered. He looked at it. "She called ahead," Bev said, expressionless. "The Hayes woman. Paid for your breakfast for the week." Ethan looked at Clara. Clara pressed her lips together. "She's efficient," she said. He looked at the sandwich. He looked at his coffee. He let out a slow breath. "She sounds like a lot," he said. "She is," Clara said. "But she's also the reason I'm still alive, and she didn't even know she was doing it. She raised me to believe that someone would help if I needed it. I took a long time to believe her." Her voice dropped. You were the first person who made me believe it again." The cafe was filling up around them, the Monday morning crowd building, voices and orders and the hiss of the coffee machine. Through the window, the street was gray and cold, and the day was already going. Ethan picked up his coffee. "Tell your mother," he said slowly, "that I appreciate the breakfast." Clara's eyes moved to his face. "And that I'll think about the card," he said. She nodded, just once, but the look in her eyes was something he'd carry with him for the rest of the day. Something that was gratitude, but went further than gratitude. Something that looked, if he was being honest with himself, a lot like hope. He drank his coffee. Outside, the city moved. Inside, the table by the window was occupied for the first time in a week, and Ethan Walker ate his breakfast slowly, with no particular rush, in the company of someone who had learned, at some cost, to trust that the world contained people worth trusting. And somewhere in Connecticut, a woman named Margaret Hayes was already in her car. He called the number on Wednesday. He'd held the card for 5 days, through 2 work shifts, a school pickup, a parent-teacher conference where Lily's teacher told him she was reading 2 grade levels ahead and had strong opinions about everything, and one Saturday night where he sat at the kitchen table after Lily went to bed and just stared at the ceiling for a while, thinking about nothing and everything at the same time. Wednesday morning, he sat in his truck outside the laundry facility before his shift started, held the card in one hand and his phone in the other, and dialed. It rang once. "Mr. Walker." The voice that answered was unhurried and precise. The voice of a woman who had made 10,000 phone calls and never once been caught off guard by any of them. "I was hoping you'd call." "Mrs. Hayes," he said. "Margaret, please." A brief pause. "Clara told me you might reach out. I'm glad you did." He'd prepared something to say, something polite and brief. "I appreciate you covering the breakfast. That wasn't necessary. I just wanted to say hello." The kind of thing that closes a door gracefully without being rude about it. He had the words ready. What came out instead was, "How is she?" A beat. Then Margaret Hayes said, and there was something unmistakably warm underneath the precision, "She's safe. She's sleeping in a real bed. She ate a full meal last night for the first time in I don't know how long." Another pause. "She talked about you." He didn't respond to that. "She said you never asked her questions," Margaret said. "That you just showed up every morning without making it into anything." "It wasn't anything," Ethan said. "It was breakfast." "Mr. Walker." Her voice was careful now, deliberate. "I have spent 40 years in business. I have met a great many people who do things for other people, and nearly all of them want something in return. Recognition, reciprocity, the feeling of being a good person in a documented, witnessed way." A pause. "What you did for my daughter was none of those things, and that is considerably rarer than you might think." He didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. "I'd like to meet with you," she said. "In person, not a phone call. I think some things are better said face to face." "Mrs. Hayes." "Margaret." "Margaret." He exhaled. "I'm not looking for anything. I need you to know that up front." "I know," she said. "Clara was very clear about that. That's precisely why I'd like to meet." A beat. "I'm going to be in the city Thursday. I'd like to buy you a proper meal, not a cafe counter, a real table, a real meal. You can say no, and I won't take it personally, and I'll have Bev continue charging breakfast to my account regardless." He almost laughed at that. Almost. "You already have that set up?" "I do," she said, completely unapologetic. "It costs me very little, and it matters to you, so I did it. That's how I operate, Mr. Walker. I see something useful, and I do it. I don't wait to be asked. He looked at the laundry facility through his windshield. Gerald was already inside. He could see the lights. His shift started in 4 minutes. Thursday, he said. What time? He didn't tell anyone about the meeting. Not Gerald, not Dorothy from the pipe repair, not the parent at Lily's school who sometimes chatted with him at drop-off. He didn't know what he would have said. I'm having dinner with a billionaire because I bought her daughter egg sandwiches for 3 weeks, was the kind of sentence that didn't land right, no matter how you framed it. He told Lily he had a meeting Thursday evening and asked Mrs. Patterson next door if she could watch her for a couple of hours. Mrs. Patterson said yes without hesitation and asked if Lily could bring her library book about the jellyfish, because she wanted to hear about the immortal ones. Thursday, he put on the cleanest clothes he owned, dark pants, a collared shirt that wasn't visibly worn at the cuffs, yet. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror for a moment and thought about how this was the best he had, and it was fine. He was who he was. He wasn't going to perform something else. The restaurant Margaret Hayes had chosen was not what he expected. It wasn't the kind of place with valet parking and a wine list that needed its own binding. It was quiet and mid-range, and the kind of place where you could have a real conversation without leaning across the table. He appreciated that. It told him she'd thought about it. She was already there when he arrived, seated at a corner table, a glass of water in front of her, reading something on her phone, which she put away the moment she saw him. She stood. Margaret Hayes was in her mid-60s. She was not a small woman. She stood straight and occupied space with the comfortable confidence of someone who had never been told to make herself smaller and had long since stopped worrying about whether she should. Her hair was silver, cut short. She wore a jacket that was expensive without announcing it. Her eyes were dark and direct, and when she looked at him, he understood immediately where Clara had gotten that quality of full attention. She extended her hand. "Mr. Walker." "Ethan," he said, and shook it. "Ethan." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Please sit. Thank you for coming." He sat. She sat. A server appeared briefly and they ordered. He got whatever the server recommended because he didn't know the menu and wasn't going to pretend otherwise. Margaret ordered without looking at the menu, which suggested she'd eaten here before. When the server left, she looked at him directly. "I want to start," she said, "by telling you something about my daughter that she probably hasn't told you." He waited. "Clara was not always cautious," Margaret said. "She was reckless, actually. The good kind of reckless. She ran marathons. She took risks. She laughed loudly in restaurants." She paused. Marcus changed that. Not all at once, slowly, the way those things always happen. He made the world feel smaller, and then smaller, and then small enough that she felt like she had no room to move at all. Her voice was steady, but her hands had tightened slightly around her water glass. By the time she left him, she had been so thoroughly convinced that she was too much, too loud, too independent, too difficult, that she barely spoke above a whisper. Ethan was quiet. "When she called me last Monday," Margaret said, "the first thing she said was, 'Mom, I'm okay.' Not, 'Mom, I'm scared,' or 'Mom, I need help.' She said, 'I'm okay.' And she meant it." She looked at him. "She hadn't meant it in a long time. That is what you gave her." He shook his head slowly. "I bought her breakfast." "You saw her," Margaret said. "You sat across from her, and you asked for nothing, and you showed up every single morning, and you let her be a person who is worth showing up for. That is not a small thing, Ethan. That is, in fact, a very large thing, dressed up as a small thing." He looked at the table. He wasn't a man who was comfortable being thanked. He'd never known exactly what to do with it. It made him feel like something was being misread, like the person thanking him was applying meaning to something he'd just done because it was the obvious thing to do. But the way Margaret Hayes said it made it hard to dismiss. "How is she now?" he asked. "Really?" Margaret's expression shifted into something more complicated. "She's safe," she said. "Marcus's family they've been dealt with, legally. My attorneys have been working on that." Something tightened in her jaw. "He won't bother her again. I can say that with confidence." "Good," Ethan said. He meant it with everything he had. "She's rebuilding," Margaret continued. "She's starting to... She has an idea, something she wants to do. She hasn't told me all of it yet, but from what she's described, it has to do with women in situations like hers. Women who need what she needed and don't have anyone to call." She looked at him. "I think you probably had something to do with inspiring that." "She did that herself," he said. "Yes," Margaret agreed, "but sometimes we need someone to remind us we're capable of it." She leaned forward slightly. "Which brings me to why I asked you here." He straightened. He'd been waiting for this. "I want to help you," she said. "Not as a transaction, not as a debt being repaid. I want to help you because I can, and because it would mean something, and because..." She paused. "Because men like you don't get helped nearly enough, and the world is worse for it." "Mrs. Hayes, let me finish," she said. Not unkindly, but firmly. "I've done my research. I know what your financial situation looks like. I know you carry debt. I know your daughter is bright and will need opportunities that are currently beyond your reach. I know you own your skills, and your integrity, and your labor, and very little else." She looked at him. "I want to change some of that. I want to clear your debt. I want to establish an education fund for Lily, full and complete, wherever she wants to go, whenever she's ready. And I want to provide a housing supplement so that you're not working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on." The restaurant was quiet around them. He could hear his own breathing. "I'm not asking you to become something different," she said. "I'm not asking you to work for me, or represent me, or perform gratitude. I'm asking you to let me give your daughter a future that your labor has already earned, and the world has simply failed to deliver." He sat with it. He sat with all of it. "Why?" he said finally. She looked at him. "Not the reason you've given me," he said. "I understand that reason. It's logical. But why does it matter to you, personally? Why does this matter?" He gestured vaguely between them. "You could write a check to 12 organizations and do more aggregate good than anything you do for me. So why me?" Margaret Hayes looked at him for a long moment. Something moved through her expression. Something real. Something that wasn't the practiced clarity of a businesswoman making a case. "Because my daughter called me," she said quietly. "And the reason she finally called me, after 8 months, after everything, was because a man in a café reminded her that strangers could be kind." Her voice was steady, but very careful. "I have money, Ethan. I've always had money, and I have spent a very long time trying to figure out what it is actually for, what it can do that nothing else can." She paused. "Watching my daughter survive was one answer. Finding the man who helped her survive, and making sure his daughter doesn't have to watch him break himself in half trying to give her a life, that's another." He didn't speak for a while. Outside on the street, he could hear traffic, life moving, indifferent and continuous. He thought about Lily. He thought about the library, the jellyfish book, her face in the yellow swimsuit at the beach. He thought about the sticky note on the wall. He thought about what it meant to accept something you hadn't asked for and hadn't earned, not in the way the world usually kept score. He thought about Clara, sitting at that table with her hands flat on the surface, steadying herself. He thought about how she'd said, "I forgot what it felt like to be looked after." He understood that. Now, he understood it more than he wanted to. "I need to think about it," he said. "Of course," Margaret said immediately. "I'm not saying no," he said. "I'm saying I need to sit with it." She nodded. "Take your time." The food arrived. They ate. And somewhere in the middle of it, without either of them planning it, the conversation shifted away from money and offers and futures, and became something simpler. Two people at a table, talking about Clara, about Lily, about what it meant to raise a daughter alone, about the particular exhaustion and the particular privilege of being the person someone else depends on completely. Margaret told him about raising Clara after her father left. He told her about Dana. Neither of them performed the sadness of those stories. They just exchanged them, the way adults do when they've each survived enough to stop pretending things weren't hard. By the time the check came, which Margaret paid before he could reach for it, smoothly and without drama, he felt something he hadn't expected to feel coming into this dinner. He felt like he'd been seen. Not the grateful recipient version of himself, not the exhausted single dad version, not the 3 jobs and a sticky note version. Just himself. Ethan Walker, a man who paid attention and showed up, and tried to do the obvious right thing when the obvious right thing presented itself. He stood to leave. Margaret stood with him. "Whatever you decide," she said, "Clara will want to see you again. She's asked me to tell you that. She's not going back to the café. It's not safe yet. But she'd like to see you before too much time passes." "I'd like that," he said. Margaret looked at him with those direct, dark eyes. "You're a good man, Ethan," she said. "I don't say that easily." He shook her hand. He walked out into the cold night air and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, his breath showing. The city going on around him in all its indifferent noise. And he felt, not lightness exactly, but something like the sensation of a weight he'd been carrying for so long he'd forgotten it was there, beginning, for the first time, to shift. He got in his truck. He drove home. Mrs. Patterson was asleep on the couch when he came in, Lily curled against her side, the jellyfish book open and face down on the coffee table. He stood in the doorway and watched them both for a moment. Then he went to the wall. He stood in front of the sticky note. "She's counting on you. Don't quit." He looked at it for a long time. Then he went to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and picked up his phone. He had one message, a number he didn't recognize. He opened it and read, "It was good to be back at the table this morning. Thank you for not letting me disappear. C." He read it twice, put the phone down, looked at the ceiling. Then he picked up the cream-colored card that was still sitting on the kitchen table where he'd left it, and he held it between his fingers, and he made a decision. Not for himself. He'd stopped making decisions for himself a long time ago. But for Lily, asleep on the couch next to Mrs. Patterson, her mouth slightly open, her jellyfish book waiting for morning. For her, he could learn how to accept something. He could learn how to let someone help. He put the card in his wallet, turned off the kitchen light, and carried his daughter to bed. He called Margaret Hayes the next morning. Not from the café, not from his truck, from the kitchen table at 6 a.m. before Lily woke up, with a cup of coffee in front of him that he hadn't touched yet. He'd been awake since 4:30. Not the anxious kind of awake, not the lying there with the weight on his chest kind, just awake, clear-headed, like a decision that had been made in the night had somehow quieted everything underneath it. She picked up on the second ring. "I've thought about it," he said. "And?" Her voice was even, giving him nothing, waiting. "I'm going to say yes," he said. But I need you to hear a few things first. Go ahead. He looked at the surface of his coffee. I'm not going to pretend this is comfortable for me. I've never taken anything I didn't work for. That's not a virtue. It's just how I was built. And I know it's kept me from asking for help when I probably should have. He paused. But I've been thinking about Lily, about what she deserves. And I've been thinking about the fact that pride is only worth something if it's protecting the right things. And I'm not sure mine has been. Silence on the line. Listening silence. So yes, he said. I'll accept. For Lily's education, for the debt, I'll accept that. The housing supplement too. He stopped. But I want to be clear that this doesn't put me in any arrangement I don't understand. I'm not looking for a patron. I'm not looking to owe anyone anything. I want it clean. Ethan, Margaret said, I'm not interested in owning anyone's gratitude. What I'm offering is a gift. Gifts don't come with strings. If they do, they're not gifts. They're transactions. And I have enough of those. A brief pause. My attorneys will draw up a simple letter of gift. No conditions, no obligations, no appearances required. You'll have a copy. Your name will be on nothing that obligates you to me or anyone connected to me. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. And he could hear something release in her voice. Not relief exactly, but the quiet satisfaction of a thing clicking into its right place. There's one more thing, he said. Yes? I want to see Clara, he said, before any paperwork, before any of the formal parts. I want to see her first. A pause. I'll arrange it, Margaret said. Today, if you can manage it. Clara was staying at a hotel on the north side of the city that had a lobby with high ceilings and the kind of furniture that communicated security without being ostentatious about it. Margaret had texted him the address. He came straight from his morning shift, still in his work clothes, and he stood at the front desk and gave his name to a young man in a navy blazer who made a phone call and then directed him to a seating area near a window that looked out onto a courtyard. He waited about 3 minutes. Then Clara came around the corner, walking. Not in the wheelchair, but walking. Moving slowly and with a slight favoring of her right side that told him the recovery was real and ongoing, not finished. She was wearing a gray sweater, and her hair was down again, the way it had been at the café on Monday. And she looked different. Not just the walking. Something in her face had opened up. The tight, careful composure was still there, but it wasn't holding as much weight behind it. She saw him, and she stopped for just a second, a half-beat pause, and then she kept walking toward him. He stood up. You're walking, he said. Most days now, she said. Physical therapy 3 times a week. It's... She made a face. It's humbling. Good humbling or bad humbling? The kind that makes you grateful for the floor, she said. He almost laughed. She did too, briefly, and then they stood there for a moment, in the particular way of two people who know each other in one context and are now navigating the slightly altered gravity of a different one. Sit down, she said. You look like you've been up since 4. 4:30, he said. Heroic, she said dryly, and sat across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside the window, the courtyard was quiet. A few bare trees, the low gray sky of November pressing down on everything. Somewhere in the hotel, a door opened and closed. My mother called me this morning, Clara said. She said you'd agreed. I did. She looked at her hands. How do you feel about it? He thought about the question honestly. Like I made the right decision for the wrong reasons for a long time, and finally made it for the right one, he said. She looked up. Lily, he said. It's always been about Lily. Clara was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? Sure. When you first started buying me breakfast, she said, did you know that I needed it the way I needed it? Not just the food, she searched for the word, the consistency of it. Did you understand what it was doing? He considered that. No, he said honestly. I saw someone who looked like she hadn't eaten, and I bought a sandwich. I wasn't reading the situation. I just did what seemed obvious. That's what I thought, she nodded slowly. That's what made it work. She looked out the window. If you'd been trying to help me, I would have felt it. I would have pulled away. I've been helped by people who were trying to help me before, and it always felt like being handled. She paused. You weren't trying to do anything. You were just present. Clara. What? You don't have to explain why it worked, he said. You don't owe me a post-mortem on my own behavior. She laughed. A real one this time, short and surprised. Fair point. She tucked her hair behind her ear. I'm still learning how to accept things without justifying them. Same, he said. She looked at him. My mother likes you. I like her, he said. She's direct. She's a lot. She's a lot in the right direction, he said. There's a difference. Clara smiled at that, wide and unguarded, the way he'd seen once before in the café, and had thought about afterward more than he'd expected to. Don't tell her you said that. She'll frame it. He smiled back. They talked for another hour, really talked. The unhurried, following wherever it goes kind of talking that he hadn't done with another adult in longer than he could easily remember. She told him more about Marcus, not the whole story, but enough. Enough that he understood the architecture of it, the way control gets built so gradually that the person inside it doesn't see the walls going up until they're already surrounded. She didn't tell it for sympathy. She told it the way she told most things, as a matter of record. And he listened the way he'd learned to listen, without reacting, without interjecting, just receiving. He told her about Dana, more than he'd said before, not the sanitized version he gave people who asked, not we just grew apart, but the real version, the one where two people who loved each other couldn't figure out how to love each other and stay afloat at the same time. And one of them finally stopped trying, and the other one couldn't blame her, even when he wanted to. Clara listened. She didn't offer perspective or comfort. She just sat with it. That must have been lonely, she said when he finished. Yeah, he said. It was. Is it still? He thought about it. Less than it was, he said. And he meant it, which surprised him slightly. The paperwork came on a Monday. 2 attorneys, one from Margaret's firm, one an independent third party she'd hired specifically so that Ethan would have someone in his corner who wasn't working for her, arrived at the conference room at a law office on the 4th floor of a building downtown that Ethan had driven past 100 times without ever having reason to enter. He sat at the table in his good clothes again and read every page. Both attorneys had told him he could take time with it, and he took them at their word. He read it slowly and carefully, the way he approached anything mechanical, not rushing, not performing confidence he didn't have, just working through it systematically until he understood what he was looking at. The debt clearance, the education trust in Lily's name, the housing supplement structured as a monthly deposit that required nothing from him, no check-ins, no accounting, no conditions. A letter from Margaret, attached separately and not part of the legal documentation, that he read last. The letter was 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph said, in clear and simple language, that what he had done for her daughter had mattered more than she had words for, and that this was not a payment, but a recognition. The second paragraph said, "My daughter told me that you have a note on your wall that says, 'She's counting on you. Don't quit.' I want you to know that you haven't, not once. And she's going to have everything she needs because of that." He read the second paragraph twice. Then he signed the papers. The independent attorney, a younger man named Brooks, with wire-rimmed glasses and a serious expression, shook his hand after. "It's a clean agreement," he said. "Genuinely, no catches." "I know," Ethan said. "I just needed to read it myself." Brooks nodded like he understood completely. "Smart," he said. He rode the elevator down alone, stood on the sidewalk outside the building, and looked at the street. The city was doing what cities do, moving, generating, spending itself, replacing the spent parts with new ones, indifferent to any single life inside it. He felt something he didn't have a quick word for. Not happiness, exactly. Not relief. Something more like the feeling of ground under his feet after a long time of walking on something that shifted. He texted Clara. "Done." She replied in under a minute. "How do you feel?" He thought about it. Then he typed, "Like someone just put weight down that I didn't realize I was carrying." 3 dots appeared. Then, "Yeah, I know that feeling." Then, after a moment, "Lily's going to do great things." He read that standing on the sidewalk with the cold wind coming off the street. He read it twice. Then he put his phone in his pocket and walked to his truck and sat there for a moment with his hands on the wheel, not driving anywhere yet, just sitting. He thought about the morning in early October when he'd walked into Morning Bell running 7 minutes late and seen a woman in a green jacket sitting alone at a table near the window. He thought about a sugar dispenser on the floor. He thought about the 30 seconds it had taken to bend down, pick it up, set it back on the table. 30 seconds. Not a sacrifice, not a decision, just the obvious thing. He started the truck. He had a delivery route in 40 minutes. 3 weeks after the paperwork, on a Tuesday evening, Margaret Hayes called him. He was in the middle of helping Lily with a math worksheet when the phone rang. Long division, which Lily approached with the focused fury of someone personally insulted by the concept, and he stepped into the kitchen to take it. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Margaret said. "Long division," he said. "God help you both," she said. "I'll be brief." A pause. "Clara has been working on something. The organization she mentioned to me, she's making it real. She's found a space. She has a framework. She's calling it the table." He was quiet. "She says the name came from somewhere obvious," Margaret said. He could hear the smile in it. "She wants to ask you something, directly, not through me. But she wanted me to lay the groundwork so it wasn't out of nowhere." "Okay," he said. "She's going to ask you to be involved," Margaret said. "Not in a business capacity, not as an employee. She wants to establish a board of people who function as what she's calling anchors. Ordinary people who have demonstrated a particular kind of integrity in their private lives." A pause. "She doesn't want the organization to be run by people who are impressive on paper. She wants it held together by people who do the right thing when nobody's watching." He leaned against the kitchen counter. "She thought of you first," Margaret said. He didn't answer immediately. "You don't have to say yes to me," she said. "She'll ask you herself. I just wanted you to hear it without the ambush of it." "I appreciate that," he said. "She's not the same person she was 8 months ago," Margaret said quietly. "You should know that too. She's—" She paused, and for the first time since he'd known her, her voice had a rougher edge. The kind that comes from emotion that's been carefully managed for a long time, finally pressing against its container. She's herself again. The version of herself I thought I'd lost. A beat. I don't say that lightly. He stood in his kitchen with the sound of Lily in the next room, erasing something aggressively on her worksheet. And he thought about a woman in a green jacket and a wheelchair, sitting alone with cold tea. And the way she'd looked when he'd first set a sandwich in front of her. That flash of wariness, that involuntary guard. And how long it had taken for that guard to become something different. "Tell her I'll listen," he said. "That's all she's asking," Margaret said. After they hung up, he stood there for a moment. Then Lily's voice came from the other room. "Dad? Dad, I think I broke the long division." "You can't break long division," he called back. "I definitely broke it. It came out negative." He pushed off the counter and went back in. She was holding her pencil in both hands and looking at her worksheet with the expression of someone who has personally been wronged by mathematics. He sat down next to her, looked at the problem. "Walk me through what you did." She walked him through it. He found the spot where it went sideways. She'd dropped a 0. Easy mistake, common mistake. And he showed her where, without making it into anything more than what it was. "Oh," she said. "Oh, that's so simple." "Most things are," he said, "once you find the right spot to look." She redid the problem, got it right, moved immediately to the next one with zero acknowledgement of the previous struggle, the way children do, the beautiful, clean slate way that adults spend years trying to recover. He watched her work. He thought about what it meant to be an anchor, to be the kind of person who holds something steady, not because they're exceptional, but because they showed up and kept showing up, and did the obvious right thing when it presented itself. He thought he could probably do that. He thought he'd probably been doing it for a long time, without a name for it. Lily finished the worksheet, checked it over with a thoroughness that he recognized as entirely his, and set her pencil down with finality. "Done," she said. "Good work," he said. She looked at him. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "You seem different lately," she said. The careful, observational tone of a child who sees more than adults assume they see. "Like something changed." He looked at her. "Something did," he said. "Something good." She considered this with the seriousness she brought to most things. "Is it about the lady from the café?" He blinked. "How do you know about the lady from the café?" "Mrs. Patterson told me you were going to meet a nice woman for dinner," she said. "And Mrs. Patterson doesn't lie." He made a mental note to have a word with Mrs. Patterson. "It's connected to that," he said. "It's complicated." "Is she nice?" Lily asked. "She is," he said. "Is she your friend?" He thought about that. "Yeah," he said. "She is." Lily seemed to file this away as satisfactory. She picked up her pencil again, moving on to something else, and he sat beside her at the kitchen table in the small apartment, with the bare walls and the sticky note and the sandcastle photo, and he felt full. Not complete in some finished, perfect way, just full, present. Okay. He was going to get up and make dinner in a few minutes. He was going to wake up at 4:30 tomorrow and go to work. He was going to buy coffee from Bev and leave $1 tip and keep doing the ordinary things that apparently, mysteriously, meant something. But for now, he just sat next to his daughter and listened to her pencil move on paper and let the evening be what it was. Clara called him on a Wednesday morning, which was the right day for it. He would think about that later, how it was a Wednesday, the middle of everything, not the beginning and not the end. He was in his truck outside the laundry facility, engine running, heater going, and when her name came up on his phone screen, he felt something that was not quite surprise, because Margaret had prepared him, but something adjacent to it. The sensation of something that had been moving toward a moment, finally arriving at it. "Hey," he said. "Hey." A pause. "Is this a bad time?" "I've got 5 minutes before my shift." "Then I'll talk fast." He could hear her smile in it. "I want to tell you about the table. I want to tell you what it actually is before I ask you anything, because I don't want to ask first and explain second. That feels like the wrong order." "Okay," he said. "It's a resource organization," she said, "for women leaving unsafe situations. Not a shelter. There are shelters. They do good work. That's not what's missing. What's missing is the part after. After you're physically safe. After you've left." She paused. "The part where you're sitting alone somewhere trying to figure out who you are, when you're not surviving anymore. Trying to trust the world again. Trying to believe that ordinary life is available to you." Another pause, smaller. "Trying to believe that strangers can be kind." He was quiet. "We're going to have a physical space," she said. "A real one. Somewhere that feels like... not an office, not a waiting room. Somewhere that feels like a table you can sit at, with coffee and food and people who show up not because they're trying to fix you, but because they decided you're worth showing up for." Her voice was careful and certain at the same time, the way a person sounds when they've been thinking about something for a long time and have finally found the exact right words for it. That's the whole idea. That's all it is. A table. And people who keep coming back to it. Ethan looked through his windshield at the laundry facility. Gerald was inside, moving past the window. The day was gray and cold, and entirely ordinary. "Clara," he said. "I know what I'm asking," she said quickly. "I'm asking you to give time you don't have. I'm asking you to attach your name to something you didn't start. I'm asking you to sit on a board with people who are probably nothing like you, who came to this from completely different directions, and to be the version of yourself that you are at 6 in the morning in a café when nobody's watching." She stopped. "I'm asking a lot. You're not asking me to be anything I'm not," he said. Silence on the line. "That's the only reason I'd say yes to something like this," he said. "Because I'm not qualified by any traditional measure. I don't have a background in nonprofits. I don't have connections. I fix leaky pipes and deliver groceries and work a laundry line." He paused. "But if what you need is someone who shows up, I can do that. I've only ever known how to do that." "That's exactly what I need," she said. "That's the whole point of it." "Then yes," he said. "I'm in." He heard her exhale, long and slow, the way a person breathes when they've been holding something and can finally put it down. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "I haven't done anything." "You already did," she said. "A long time ago, in a café, with a sugar dispenser." He almost said something. He didn't. He just sat with it. "Go to work," she said. "I'll send you the details." He went to work. The table opened on the first Saturday of February, in a ground floor space in a neighborhood that was neither expensive nor forgotten. The kind of neighborhood where a place like this could exist without being a statement, where it could just be a place people went. Clara had spent 3 months turning it into something real. Margaret had provided the resources. Clara had provided everything else. Ethan had been to 2 planning meetings in January, sat at a conference table with 4 other people, none of whom he'd met before, all of whom had arrived at this from their own angle, through their own story. There was a woman named Rosario who had run a domestic violence hotline for 12 years. A retired judge named Harmon who had spent 2 decades watching women cycle through his courtroom and had finally decided the system he worked in wasn't going to fix the problem on its own. A young social worker named Deja, who was 29 and spoke with a precision and conviction that reminded Ethan of Lily when she was certain about something. And a man named Frank, who had lost his sister to an abusive relationship 20 years ago and had been quietly funding women's organizations ever since. Not publicly, not for recognition, just because it was the thing he'd decided to do. Ethan had sat at that table and listened and said what he thought when he had something to add and stayed quiet when he didn't. He hadn't tried to perform expertise he didn't have. He hadn't tried to match the professional vocabulary of people who'd spent careers in the space. He'd just been present and attentive and honest. And at the end of the second meeting, Rosario had looked at him across the table and said, "You're going to be useful." And it was the most straightforward compliment he'd received in years. The morning of the opening, he brought Lily. He'd asked Clara first, sent her a message that said, "Would it be okay if I brought my daughter? I want her to see this." She'd replied in about 40 seconds, "I would love that. Bring her." Lily was 8 years old, and she dressed herself for the occasion in her most serious outfit. Dark jeans, a blue sweater, her hair in a neat ponytail. And in the truck on the way over, she was unusually quiet. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You okay?" he said. "I'm thinking," she said. "About what?" "About why you're on the board of a place for women," she said. "Mrs. Patterson says it's because you help someone. I want to know the whole story." He kept his eyes on the road. "It's a long story." "We have 11 minutes, she said, with complete confidence in her estimate. He thought about where to start. He started with the café. He told her about Clara, about the sugar dispenser, about the egg sandwiches. He kept it simple, stripped down, the version a child could hold. He told her about Margaret, about the paperwork, about the education trust. Lily was quiet for the entire 11 minutes. When he parked, she sat for a moment before getting out. "So," she said, "you help someone by just being there." "That's about right," he said. "And then her mom helped us." "Yes." She turned this over. "That's like a chain," she said. "Yeah," he said. "It is." She thought about it one more second. Then she opened the truck door. "Okay," she said. "Let's go see it." The space was warm when they walked in. Someone had put flowers on the tables. Real ones, nothing extravagant, just simple and alive. The tables themselves were round, which Clara had been specific about in the planning meetings. "No head of the table," she'd said. "Everyone at a round table is equally at the center." The walls had light on them, actual, thought-out light, warm and steady without being clinical. There was coffee on a sideboard, and food, real food, not the apologetic institutional kind. And the whole room had the feeling of a place where you were expected and welcome, which was harder to manufacture than it sounded. Clara was standing near the window when they came in. She was in her wheelchair today. Not always, not a permanent state, but today. She turned when she heard the door. She and Lily looked at each other. Ethan had a half-second of concern. He didn't know how they would take to each other. Didn't know how Clara was with children. Didn't know how Lily would process the wheelchair without making it into something. And then Lily walked directly over and said, without any preamble, "Are you Clara?" "I am," Clara said. "My dad told me about you," Lily said. "He said you were brave." Clara glanced at Ethan over Lily's head. He gave a small shrug that said, "She asked, I answered." "He said that?" Clara said. "He said you ran marathons and then something hard happened and you kept going anyway," Lily said. "He said that's what brave is. Not when nothing is hard. When something is hard and you do the thing anyway." Clara was quiet for a moment. Her expression was careful, held, the way a person looks when something has landed directly on a place they keep protected. Your dad, she said finally, is pretty smart. He's okay, Lily said with the diplomatic neutrality of a child who loves someone without intending to be effusive about it. He's better at fixing things than at math. I'll keep that in mind, Clara said. Lily looked around the room with the assessment of someone conducting a thorough inspection. I like the tables, she said. They're round. That was important to me, Clara said. Because everyone's equal at a round table, Lily said. Clara looked at her. Exactly. We learned about King Arthur, Lily said, by way of explanation, and walked off to examine the food. Ethan watched her go. Then he looked at Clara. Sorry, he said. Don't be, Clara said. She's wonderful. She's a lot, he said. A lot in the right direction, Clara said, very deliberately, with a sideways look that told him she'd remembered exactly where he'd said that, and to whom. He laughed. A real one. The kind that comes from somewhere loose and unguarded. Clara laughed too, and for a moment they were just two people standing in a warm room on a February Saturday, laughing at a callback to a dinner 3 months ago. And it was easy, and it was good, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The opening had about 40 people. Some were donors, some were partners, some were women who had heard about the table through the network Clara had been quietly building for months. They moved through the space and talked and ate, and some of them cried a little, not from sadness, but from the particular emotion that comes from seeing something you needed exist in the world. Ethan stood near the window for a while and watched it all. He watched Rosario talking intently with two women he didn't recognize, her hands moving, their heads nodding. He watched Frank standing quietly at the sideboard, refilling coffee for people without being asked, without drawing attention to it, just doing the obvious, useful thing. He watched Lily sitting at one of the round tables with a plate of food and her phone, texting Mrs. Patterson the full report, which he knew without looking. He watched Clara. She moved through the room differently than she did in the café, with intention, with presence, with the particular energy of someone doing the thing they were built to do. She stopped and talked to everyone. She remembered names. She listened the way she always listened, with her whole attention, and the people she talked to stood differently after than they had before, like they'd been handed something. Margaret was there too, arrived quietly mid-morning, and stood near the back of the room in a way that said clearly, "This is Clara's. I'm just here to witness." When she caught Ethan's eye across the room, she gave him a single nod, small and precise, and he nodded back, and that was enough. At one point during the morning, Clara came and stood next to him at the window. They stood side by side and looked at the room. "You did this," he said. "We did this," she said. He shook his head. "No. The idea is yours. The work is yours. I showed up for 2 meetings and signed my name." "You showed up," she said. "That's not nothing. That's never nothing." She paused. "You taught me that, actually." He looked at her. "You showed up every morning," she said. "You didn't announce it. You didn't make it mean something out loud. You just did it, again and again, until I understood that it was real. That's the whole philosophy of this place." She gestured at the room. "Show up. Be real. Do it again tomorrow." He looked at the room, at the round tables, and the warm light, and the flowers, and the people moving through it all. "It's a good philosophy," he said. "It's yours," she said. "I just built a room around it." He didn't argue with her. He wasn't sure she was wrong. Lily appeared at his elbow with an empty plate and an expression of great satisfaction. "The food is really good," she said. "Did you have the thing with the cheese?" "Not yet," he said. "You should," she said. "It's important." She looked up at Clara. "Your thing is really nice. I like how it smells in here." "Thank you," Clara said seriously. "It smells like somewhere you're supposed to be," Lily said, and walked off to get more of the thing with the cheese. Clara and Ethan both watched her go. "How did you end up with her?" Clara said, softly, not a question. "Luck," he said. "Pure luck." "You keep saying that. Luck." She shook her head slightly. "You show up every day, you do the right thing every time, you never quit, and then you attribute everything good that happens to luck." "I attribute my daughter to luck," he said. "The rest of it, I'll take credit for." She smiled. "Fair," she said. He drove home that afternoon with Lily asleep in the back seat, which she would have denied the capability of doing since she was 6 years old, but which happened with some regularity on days that had been full. He drove through the city in the late winter light, the kind of light that comes in at a low angle and makes everything look briefly beautiful, even the ordinary parts. He thought about October, about the alarm at 4:47, and the cold floor, and the 4-second rule, and the kitchen ritual, and the drive to morning bell. About a glass sugar dispenser on a café floor, and the 30 seconds that it took to bend down and pick it up. He thought about all the things that had come from those 30 seconds. The debt that was gone. The trust in Lily's name, sitting somewhere secure and growing, waiting for her. The apartment that felt less like surviving and more like living. The round tables in a room that smelled, according to his daughter, like somewhere you're supposed to be. He thought about Clara and the way she'd said, "You showed up." He thought about Lily, asleep in the back seat with cheese on her sweater. He thought about the sticky note on the wall. He'd taken it down last week, not because it wasn't true anymore, but because he didn't need the reminder in the same way. It had done its job. It had held him upright through the years when upright was a daily act of will. And now, upright was just how he stood, and the note had earned its retirement. He'd folded it carefully and put it in the small box in his closet where he kept the things that had mattered. Lily's first tooth, a photograph of his mother, a handwritten note Dana had left him in the early years before things got hard. The card from a Christmas a long time ago that he'd kept because the handwriting looked like someone who was still trying. The note belonged there, with the things that had shaped him. He pulled into the parking lot of the apartment building and sat for a minute after he cut the engine, listening to Lily breathe in the back seat. Outside, the evening was coming in fast, the February dark that arrived before you were ready for it. The streetlights already on, the windows of the building lit up in their various ways. People home, people cooking, people living whatever it was they were living. His phone buzzed. A message from Clara. "Thank you for today, for bringing her, for all of it." He typed back, "You built something real." She replied, "So did you, a long time before today." He read it twice, put the phone in his pocket. He got out of the truck, opened the back door, and looked at his daughter. This stubborn, curious, cheese enthusiast, jellyfish expert, long division survivor of a person who had been his entire reason for the past 3 years and would be his reason for every year after. "Hey," he said quietly. "We're home." She stirred, blinked. "Did I fall asleep?" "Definitely not," he said. "Good," she said, still half asleep, "because I was awake the whole time." He picked her up. She was getting almost too heavy for this. Almost. Not quite. And carried her toward the building. She let him, which she didn't always, which meant she was more tired than she was letting on. At the door, she said, drowsy and unprompted, "Dad?" "Yeah?" "That lady Clara," she said. "She looks at you like you did something really important." He pushed open the door. "I picked up a sugar dispenser," he said. Lily made the sound she made when she suspected adults were being deliberately reductive. "Dad." "I bought some sandwiches," he said. "Dad." He carried her up the stairs. "I just showed up," he said. "That was all. I just kept showing up." She was quiet for a moment, her head on his shoulder. Then, in the specific tone of a child who has decided that the adult has finally said something worth keeping, she said, "Yeah, that's the important part." He got her inside, got her settled, made sure she had water on the nightstand and her jellyfish book within reach. Stood in the doorway of her room for a moment in the way parents do, the particular stillness of watching a child sleep, which never becomes ordinary no matter how many times you do it. Then he went to the kitchen, made himself a cup of coffee he didn't really need, stood at the window and looked out of the city. He had a shift tomorrow at 5, a delivery route in the afternoon, a board meeting for the table next Thursday, a parent-teacher conference in 2 weeks, and a pipe repair scheduled for a woman on the east side who'd been waiting patiently and deserved not to wait much longer. His life was full of ordinary things. It had always been full of ordinary things. The difference was that the ordinary things meant something now, in a way he could feel rather than just insist on. The difference was that somewhere in the city there was a room with round tables and warm light where women could sit and be seen and believe that strangers were capable of showing up. And that room existed in some small but real way because he had bent down one morning without thinking and picked something up off the floor. He drank his coffee. Outside, the city did what it always did, kept going, kept spending itself, kept being enormous and indifferent to any individual life inside it. And inside this small apartment, at this kitchen counter, a man who had never once considered himself extraordinary stood quietly in the dark and understood, without any drama, without any announcement, that ordinary was not the same thing as small. The things you do when nobody's watching are the things that shape what happens next. The small acts are the ones that compound. The table you sit at, the sandwich you buy, the person you notice when everyone else looks away. These are the things, these unremarkable, faithful, unglamorous things that build the world. He rinsed his cup, turned off the kitchen light, went to check on Lily one more time because he always checked one more time. She was asleep, one hand under her cheek, her jellyfish book open on the pillow beside her. The immortal ones, the ones that could become young again, the ones that survived by becoming something the world didn't expect. He pulled her blanket up, turned off her lamp. He walked to his own room in the dark, set his alarm for 4:47, and lay down. He gave himself exactly 4 seconds. Then he closed his eyes and slept without weight. And tomorrow he would get up and do it all again. Because that was what it meant to be the kind of person who shows up. And he had never once in his life been anything else. If this story moved you, if Ethan reminded you of someone, if Clara's courage hit close to home, if Lily made you smile, drop your city in the comments. I want to see every corner of the world this story has reached. And if you stayed until the very last word, you already know what this channel is about. Subscribe. The next story is waiting, and it starts with another ordinary moment that changes everything.